English translation 467th contact. Saturday 28th of June 2008, 15:05 hours.
I thought I would be in the office before you, Ptah, dear friend. I just drank my coffee in peace after you called me. I thought you were going to be here in about 10 minutes. It is also just as well. But you are very welcome, and my greetings to you too, of course.
Greetings also to you, my dear friend. It is a pleasure, Edward, to see you well. And right at the beginning of our conversation, I would like to send you greetings from my daughters Simya, Say, and Plaja, from Quetzal, Ikarina, as well as from everyone you know personally. They all told me to wish you all the best for your health and to assure you of their love for you.
Oh, thanks. Please say thank you to all of them, but also give them my warmest greetings and let them know that I also think of them all very often.
I will gladly pass on all your connecting words.
May I ask you something right now?
You may.
The dark matter in the universe. We have talked about it a few times. But it was only in a private way, so nothing was ever written about it in the contact reports. Yes, you also kept me quiet about this topic. The last time was about 5 years ago. Is it still not allowed to say anything about it? I mean, what is the task of dark matter, and what do you call it?
It is not necessary to remain silent about it, so you can openly reveal your knowledge.
Which you could also do. But if you think that I should say something about it, then please. If I remember correctly, you call dark matter expansion substance, which also has the property that it makes every solar system, every galaxy, and the entire universe expand. So it is a kind of expansion matter.
That is true.
Then one more question, if I may ask one more.
You can, but today I would like to talk to you again in a very private way, where we can also enjoy a game of chess.
Of course, playing chess is also part of it. You know, sometimes we talk about our chess playing, because we do the game with great speed. A lot of people are surprised when I play chess at the kitchen table with group members in a fast way, and everything is done move by move in no time, while others take a long time for each move.
Chess is not a game for slow thinkers, but for fast thinkers. So the game is only interesting and of value if the thinking is very fast and logical, and if move after move is done in quick succession. Playing chess slowly says about the players that they are not capable of fast combinatorial and strategic thought processes.
Playing in a way that involves thinking about a move for a long time is also extremely boring, and in addition, somehow terrorist. But now my question. As our astronomical scientists and the humans of Earth with some general knowledge know, the Andromeda Nebula as our next galaxy is approaching our Milky Way at a speed of about 500,000 kilometers per hour. Although the universe is expanding at an enormous speed, which is why the galaxies must also be drifting apart from each other. This drifting apart is not always the case, as the mutual approach of our Milky Way and the Andromeda Nebula proves. Can you tell me why this is so? Why are the Andromeda Nebula and the Milky Way racing towards each other while other galaxies are drifting apart?
Distances are crucial in this respect, because they determine whether galaxies are racing towards each other or moving away from each other. It is of correctness that the universe is expanding, and it is precisely this that determines whether galaxies are drifting apart. As the universe expands, there is also a principle of expansion for galaxies, which means that galaxies are moving apart. However, this effect of galaxies drifting apart only occurs when they exist at a great distance from each other. This is a distance that must be calculated at about 100 million light-years. Whatever is further apart or closer to each other below this distance is subject to gravity. So, galaxies attract each other by their gravity if their distance to each other is less than 100 million light-years. And since the Andromeda Nebula and the Milky Way are only about 2.6 million light-years apart, the law of gravity comes into play, so the two galaxies attract each other. Their first encounter will take place in about 3,000,000,000 years, followed by another 1.7 billion 1,700,000 years, during which time the two galaxies will dissolve, mix, and finally merge into one oversized galaxy.
So it is not a head-on collision, but rather a process of slowly sliding into each other. Quetzal recently told me that your latest calculations regarding the stars in our Milky Way have yielded a figure of about 430,430,000,000,000. So what is the number of gravity in relation to the Andromeda Nebula?
Our calculations give a gravity of this galaxy that is 2.78 times greater than that of the Milky Way.
Huge, but seen only by us Earthlings. Cosmically speaking, however, it is only small if you consider that there are supergalaxies and hypergalaxies. Then I have another question. Are you familiar with the story about Jack the Ripper?
Of course.
There are many versions of who this killer was, but no one knows anything specific about it. I also once asked one of you, but I do not remember who I asked and what the answer was. I searched all the recorded contact conversations, but I could not find anything regarding who the killer was and what was said. Do you know who Jack the Ripper was?
It seems that there was a private conversation about why there is no record of it. Anyway, I know nothing about such an official conversation. But concerning Jack the Ripper, it is without doubt to say that it was a man who had fallen for a degenerated sexuality, which he fulfilled in prostitutes, in order to murder them, for which he used a dagger, but also a small sword and poison. He also took organs from the dead which he cooked and ate. He was born in Canada, lived for some time in the USA and then in England. The man's name was Thomas Neal Cream, and he was a trained physician, but after several murders he came under suspicion, was arrested, charged, and sentenced to death, after which he was hanged in 1892. At the same time, however, a second man was making trouble in the same way, who prosecuted the royal house of Queen Victoria, but was never caught because he managed to evade justice and gave up his bloody activities after Thomas Neal Cream was arrested.
A copycat. That's what we call copycats. But what about extraordinary predictions? Last time there was hardly anything. And what about earthquakes, seaquakes, and special storms? Yes, we can dispense with forest fires, because they have long become commonplace all over the world, as in California, Spain, Greece, and Australia, etc.
Also this time there is not much to report. Tomorrow there will be a seaquake of magnitude 6.3 near the Greek island of Rhodes, but this is not unusual and will not cause much damage, as is the case with a 5.3 magnitude earthquake in China, although China will not be able to rest with quakes in the near future because new earthquakes are constantly occurring, which will also be the case in the month of August near Sichuan. Also for Japan in the near future, violent seaquakes, such as one of magnitude 6.4 in the northeastern sea of Japan, and on the 23rd of July, another seaquake of magnitude 6.8 occurs. At the end of June, a 5.5 magnitude quake occurred in Southern California in the Chino Hills area. On the 7th of August, a seaquake occurs in Indonesia near Sumbawa Island. But what is exceptional is that Radovan Karadzic, a former Serb leader, war criminal and genocide perpetrator, who had many thousands of Muslims, etc., murdered by the military in Srebrenica and elsewhere, and even had a hand in it himself, is finally arrested after more than 12 years and transferred to the Hague Tribunal at the end of July. Furthermore, there are extraordinary storms in Eastern Europe, which bring heavy floods and high water, which also cause death, destruction, and destruction of harvests. Europe will also be affected by severe tornadoes in August, which will cause great destruction and will increase in number and intensity in the future. After the first week of August, something extraordinary happens, which is not really extraordinary on Earth and among Earth humans, namely that the state of Georgia starts a military conflict against South Ossetia and Abkhazia, which will also result in a military intervention by Russia. The conflict claims several thousand lives.
There are still questions on the tip of my tongue. Yes, on my great journey with you and Simya. Say you also let me look far out in the Sol system at the Kuiper Belt, with the roughly Earth-sized planet through which the belt is interrupted, forming the so-called Kuiper Cliff. In the Kuiper Barrier, as you called the Kuiper Belt, there were also a large number of large objects with a diameter of more than 100 kilometers, which you named with a number of well over 110,000. But besides these billions of smaller and smallest objects form the whole belt. Now the question whether our earthly astronomers have any idea or knowledge at all that the roughly Earth-sized planet and the large number of smallest planets exist in the Kuiper Belt. We do not hear or read anything of the kind, because the rule is always that information only leaks out long after the fact, when new findings are already out of date. I also think it is idiotic that Pluto has been degraded to a dwarf object, just because it is smaller than our Earth-moon.
Pluto is undoubtedly a planet, even if it must also be classified as a minor planet. And as far as the knowledge of the terrestrial astronomical scientists is concerned, they do not yet have any knowledge of the planet in the Kuiper Barrier. Concerning a planet existing there, however, assumptions have been made for quite some time, but they are still vague.
On my great journey, you told me what you call the Kuiper planet, but I forget the name.
In the German language, we simply call it Barrier Satellite.
Yes, true. Now that you mention it, I remember. Then another question concerning the Kuiper Belt. As you told me, there is another big planet in our solar system orbiting from the Kuiper Belt, which also enters the interior of our solar system about every 3,500 or 3,600 years or so. But you did not show me this guy, as I also don't know the history of this planet, because we only talked about it in passing. May I know more about it?
Since you bring it up, it is not a secret. In fact, it is not a planet, but a dark comet, which is very rarely seen as such, once it gets so close to the sun that it emits particles, forming a tail. It orbits at the edge of the Sol system, crosses the inner Kuiper Belt, that is to say, the inner Oort cloud, and then reaches the outer Oort cloud, after which it returns and enters the interior of the SOL system about every 3,600 years. Already in ancient times, this giant comet or giant planet, which is several times the size of the Earth, was known to the Egyptians as a destroyer, and to the ancestors of the Celts as a terror spreader. This destroyer had or has nothing to do with the destroyer, which came out of our space-time structure through a dimensional gate into your space-time structure and caused a lot of trouble in it. Which is why we removed it from the Sol system some years ago and made it harmless. This destroyer, known to the ancient Egyptians and the ancestors of the Celts, is from time to time a giant comet, which can also be called a giant planet, and which is actually a so-called brown dwarf, as these formations are called by the earthly astronomical scientists. This is a form of an unfinished sun that was not able to develop into this. This comet or planet is currently on its way back into the inner SOL system, and on its unsteady orbit it causes disturbances on the planetary orbits and on the sun.
You guys are good because you didn't tell me about this. What do you call this comet or planet? And is it possible that it is the one the Sumerians called Nibiru? With regard to the Annanuki, which are said to have lived on it and to have been helpful to the humans of the Earth, Quetzal once said that this was nonsense, and that the whole thing was based only on mythological facts and on faith. He already said that Nibiru is not a planet but an unusually large comet, with an actual orbital period of 3,600 years around and in the Sol system. The Annanuki people of Nibiru is only a mythological imagination, a people that never existed, because the dark comet is not able to carry human life.
What Quetzal explained in this regard is absolutely true. The giant comet, or giant planet of several times the size of the Earth, is in fact what the ancient Sumerians called Nibiru, the ancient Egyptians destroyers, and the Celtic ancestors bringer of terror. We call him Hamarank Natal, which means dark giant.
It would have been interesting to know this before, back when we were talking about the destroyer from your space-time structure, and I was also talking to Quetzal about Nibiru. It was probably in May 1989, if I'm not mistaken.
I know your conversation at that time. It took place on the 1st of May 1989 at the 228th official contact conversation.
I do not remember the date, not even the number of official contact conversations. But your information will be true for sure. But what I want to ask, since ancient times there have been stories of giants on Earth, like Goliath, who is said to have been killed with a slingshot by the Israelite David, another one called Sipai. Goliath is said to have come from Gat in the Gaza Strip today, from a people of giants. Since time immemorial, two giant peoples have been mentioned, namely the Anakites and the Rephaites. One of these giants is said to have had 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot. Did all Anakites and Rephaites have the same physical characteristics? And what happened to these giant peoples? Do you know anything about them?
Not all of the giants of both peoples had the same physical characteristics, for there were also among them those whose hands had only 5 fingers and their feet only 5 toes. The two very small peoples of the Anakites and the Rephaites were involved in heavy battles with the ancient Egyptians and were completely exterminated by them, because they were discredited as outcasts of evil.
Typical Earth humans bullshit. But thanks for your explanation. Then something else. There is the well-known painting, The Man with the Golden Helmet, which is attributed to Rembrandt, but of which your daughter Simyase already said that it was not the work of this man, who was born sometime in 1606 and turned just over 60 years old. He died in 1669, if I'm not mistaken.
That is true. And the painting you mention is in fact not the work of Rembrandt Harmensoen van Rijn, but that of his student Willem van Kampen, who more than perfectly imitated Rembrandt's painting style and even made it his own. His works, however, were selfishly signed by Rembrandt with his own name, just as he signed many other works of his other pupils, in order to pass them off as his own works and sell them fraudulently as his own works.
And the man wearing the gold helmet in the painting, which is probably a portrait, do you know who he was?
I know that, yes. The man was the father of the Rembrandt pupil Willem van Kampen, and his name was Jacob van Kampen.
Thank you. Then this solves a mystery that has also been causing problems for art experts for some time now, who for years have been repeatedly recognizing so-called Rembrandt paintings as not being produced by him, even though they bore his signature. Yes, the paintings are real, only that they are not by Rembrandt but by his students. The forgery is only the signature by which Rembrandt fraudulently used the works of his students to represent them as his own paintings. But look here, this journal Nexus, that is sent to me from Germany, because someone there subscribed to it for me. Is this journal familiar to you? For my part, I find that it manipulates the humans, that is to say the readers, in an enormous and irresponsible way, and puts them into fear and faith through the nonsense and fantasies that are imposed on the readers. The journal is now snowing into my house for the second year already, whereby I really only found nonsense and fantasies concerning esotericism, exorcism, crop circles, ufology, photon belts, chemtrails, ghosts, demons, spiritism, clairvoyance, ether research, and alleged worldwide state and secret society conspiracies, as well as lies about the fact that the climate catastrophe is only a lying sensationalism and the death of Hitler only an invention. The fact that this magazine also praises Dr. Rath with his Health Foundation and his outrageously overpriced dietary supplements, such as vitamins, minerals, and trace elements, is also a blow to the bottom of the barrel. Considering all the health problems and even the death of the boy suffering from cancer, which caused the parents to treat the boy with Rath's ineffective food supplements and let him die despite many medical warnings, instead of giving him conventional medical treatment, which would have given him a good chance of survival. This nexus brings nonsense and bottomless fantasies without precedent, leaving out practically no topic. This nonsensical journal is just as stupid, misleading, and unrealistic as the mysteries.
Yes, I know the journals because you gave me a few copies, although I must say that they are not worth reading.
One more question. Nowadays, with naturopaths and New Age freaks and health freaks and also drugstores and so on, it is big business to sell expensive detox cures to humans for their bodies and their organs. In this regard, I once asked my family doctor, Dr. Flaxman, what the alleged body waste products are all about, and he told me that the whole thing was nonsense, because the body and its organs do not produce waste products. What do you have to say to that?
Your family doctor said exactly what is true, because neither the body itself nor its organs deposit any waste products. All waste products that accumulate in the body and its organs are automatically eliminated from the body through a completely normal process of decomposition, both through defecation and urination, and even through sweating and breathing. All sorts of cures with various substances and medicines for purification cures serve the sole purpose of taking money out of the pockets of the believers in this respect through lies and fraud, in order to satisfy the greed of the manufacturers and sellers of the nonsensical products.
I also agree with the whole thing. Then one last question. Yes, all life developed from a single-celled primeval slime, also humans. However, as I know from Sfath, there were different forms of primeval slime, from which in turn different animal life developed, such as amphibians, water life forms, and various species of dinosaurs. From a separate primeval slime form, however, the first small creatures developed, which were mammals, from which all mammals developed, so also primates and humans. These all have a uniform type of mating, but also uniform hearing organs, of course, depending on the life form, simply shaped differently according to it, but in principle in the same application and mode of action. As your father, Sfath, explained to me in my youth, the first small forms of life that developed from the primeval slime, from which humans also emerged on Earth, lived more than 250 million years ago, and also at the time when the first dinosaurs existed. These small life forms were about 10 to 12 centimeters in size, about the size of a mouse, but they changed and grew a few centimeters larger. Their lifetime was just 1 year, but with time their age increased the bigger they became. The transformation over millions of years led to different life forms, but only to mammals, and finally to many species of primates, and to forms from which humans emerged, and from which also the different apes, and those creatures that have not been found yet, like the Yeti, which is called Mahalidama by the locals and Mandabarung elsewhere. Also, Bigfoot and Sasquatch, etc. belong to it. Now, to cut a long story short, what is the name of the little animal that is the origin of all mammals, primates, and humans? Unfortunately, I forgot the name. Yes, it is also 65 years ago since Svath told me.
Our name of the small creature is Barani. But the little animal is now also known to earthly paleontologists through findings of fossilized bones, and they call it Adelobasileus, Adelobasileus cromptoni.
Thank you, I did not know that. That was my last question, so we can now turn to chess. Then let us